All right, how is everybody this morning? We want to welcome you to the Woodlake 12-step education. What we're going to do in this session, we're going to get into steps 8 and 9, the amends process. We're going to go over some do's and some don'ts of making amends. Some things that I've picked up over the years, making amends, when to, when not to. If you've been watching some of the other sessions, what you know is that we go back and we do some recapping. For an example, today we're on 8 and 9, so we're going to recap 1 through 7, about the first 15, 20 minutes, and then we get into the step that we're on for that session. Today we're on 8 and 9, so we're going to recap on 1 through 7. We're going to catch everybody up, get everybody up to date, and we're going to go through the amends process. Now, just one thing before we start recapping. If you're joining us remotely from somewhere else, you're tuning in live to us, we ask that you go on your computer and or whatever you're on and mute your speaker, your mic. Because if you don't mute your mic, you come through and you ruin the recording that we're trying to do for everybody. So we ask if you're tuning in remotely that you mute your mic, not your speaker, your mic. Okay. So to get going, if you've been tuning into some sessions, what you know is that we stress 3 things to you in the 12-step process. We stress the problem, the solution, and the plan of action. Now, those 3 pieces to the puzzle, the problem, the solution, and the plan of action. Those are pieces to the puzzle in basic problem solving. I don't care what the problem is, those 3 pieces have to be addressed. To put the puzzle together, you got to have all 3 pieces, the problem, the solution, and then the plan of action you can take that'll get you out the problem and to the solution. Most alcoholics have failed and failed miserably because they don't understand the problem. Therefore, they come up with a bunch of cockamamie-ass solutions to a problem they don't understand. But once the problem is understood, the solution and the plan of action becomes very, very simple. So, step 1, it's a problem statement. And in step 1, they tell me the 2 things that render me powerless. And it's a twofold thing. Part of it centers in the mind, part of it centers in the body. Now, the physical part of this thing is what they refer to in the doctor's opinion as an allergy of the body. And they tell me that this allergy manifests itself through the phenomenon of craving. What that means is every time I put the first one into my system, whether I smoke it, drink it, snort it, every time I put the first one in, I set this physical allergy off. The allergy produces a craving of the body. My body takes over and starts to tell my mind what to do, which is go get some more. And nothing and nobody could stop me. And I end up on one of these things called a well-known spree. Now, a spree may last a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years. It takes about 72 hours, give or take, depending on your metabolism, to get the physical craving off your ass. So if you've been using every day for a couple of months, you've been on a spree for a couple of months. You've been using every day, all day for a couple of years, you've been on a spree for a couple of years. Now, how many of y'all have ever come up off a bad spree where you got in legal trouble, financial trouble, work trouble, family trouble, and you sang the Alcoholics National Anthem? You said, I'll never do that shit again. And when you say it, you mean it, because when you say it, the suffering, the pain, the humiliation is very fresh in your mind. And that's why you say, I'll never do that shit again. So what you try to do is live in your own skin for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months. And you start a little buildup, and you get irritable, you get restless, you get discontented. The obsession of the mind starts to work on you, and it tells you, boy, one sure would make you feel better, which it does. So you put one in you, and you feel better. You get some ease and comfort, but you set the physical part off then. The allergy is produced. It sets off the craving. The body takes over again. The body overrules the mind. I'm just going to do one or two, and you end up back on a well-known spree. And in the big book, they say this is repeated over and over and over. And unless this person who has this obsession and this allergy can experience an entire personality change, there's very little hope for her recovery. Now, if you have an obsession of the mind, you cannot stay stopped, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, no matter where you go. So if you can't stay stopped because of the obsession, and once you start, you can't control how much you're going to use because of the allergy. If you combine these two things, obsession coupled with allergy, that renders you powerless. Now, a person who can see the problem, see, a person who can identify where they're really at, the problem. If a person can identify the problem, okay, the solution becomes actually quite simple. Now, for years, I tried to solve a problem I didn't understand. And I would come up with a bunch of cockamamie solutions. And when I would come up with a solution, I would go, damn, you smart. You must be related to Einstein. And then I would fall flat on my face. I'd use again. I'd come up for air and I'd go, how did I ever think that solution was going to work? Now, when I started to understand the problem, what occurred to me was why none of my solutions ever worked. The solution that works on this problem becomes real simple to a person once they understand the problem. Now, once I understood the problem about this obsession that kept kicking my ass, and every time I would buy into the obsession and put the first one in, the allergy would rip me to smithereens. So it was like a double-edged sword. The obsession got me on one side, and if the obsession didn't cut me deep enough, the allergy would. Now, I come in to a 12-step based, big book-based treatment center, like Woodlake is. And they explained the problem to me, and when they did, it's like a light bulb went off. And I went, son of a bitch. That's what's going on with me. I can't stay stopped because of the obsession. And every time I start, the allergy rips me to smithereens. Now, once they explained this to me, they said, now we got some good news for you ass. We got a solution for you. Now, since that day, February 3rd of 2001, I have been all up in this solution. Now, the solution, again, is very simple if you understand the problem. Now, the solution is also twofold. Part of it centers in the fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did say in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't say around Alcoholics Anonymous. And then they have the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the steps. Now, these two things are distinctly different. The fellowship is going to the meetings, and in these meetings, I get a lot of support. I'm in meetings and supported by people who used to be like me. They've taken the steps and had a personality change, and they're not like me anymore. and they give me a lot of support early on. Then I have to come over here and pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools that they've laid at my feet, the steps. And the directions for the steps, or the program of AA, is in the first 103 pages of the big book. In the first 103 pages of the big book, they have some precise, clear-cut directions on how to take the steps. And if I take the steps precisely and directly how the book says, I'm going to have this personality change. So if I combine these two things together, the fellowship and the program, I'm going to tap in to some real power. Not some make-believe shit, but some real power. Now, one of the problems for alcoholics is they think they know everything. So when somebody gives you some precise, clear-cut directions, see, us alcoholics, we're our little keen intellectual mind, we want to tweak that shit. And we want to do it our way. And every time an alcoholic tries to take the steps their way, they get what they always got. Now, when an alcoholic says, I give, I don't know, I'm going to do what the first 103 pages of the big book say, I have nothing to lose and everything to gain. That's when things start to change for people like me. Now, in step one, they give me the problem. They tell me I have this obsession of the mind coupled with the allergy of the body. And in step two, they give me the solution. They say you can get involved in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and you can get into the program of AA. Now, in step three, they tell me I got to decide which one I want more. Do I want to remain powerless and get everything and every consequence that comes along with it? Or do I want to seek this power? Now, if I decide I don't really want to do this like they're asking me to do, what you've really decided to do, you just don't get it yet, is to stay stuck in the problem. Now, if you decide you don't really want no more of that action, you want to get out of the problem and come over here and join us in the solution. The way you're going to carry out the step three decision is by taking action. Now, we got some action steps in the big book, and they're precise and they're clear cut. And those action steps are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And these are the steps we took, which tapped me in to the power. And once I'm tapped into the power by taking 4 through 9, I'll remain tapped in by taking 10, 11, and 12 daily. Now, I sort of look at the steps in 3 sections. 1, 2, and 3 put me in a position to do 4 through 9, which put me in a position to do 10, 11, and 12. So 1, 2, and 3 put me in a position to take the action steps, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which put me in a position to start living again in 10, 11, and 12 daily. Now, if you notice the first action step, step 4, we talked about that here recently, how it has to be done thorough and honest. Last session, we talked on 5, 6, and 7. Now, what we talked about the last session is in the 5th step, I really got to see why I lost everything. And it was because of these defects of character and these shortcomings. I was a selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, inconsiderate, dishonest ass person. And sober or loaded, I would run that shit on people. Now, coming out of the 5th step, seeing that it's these defects of character which really were the root of my trouble. What I really try to do today, and have been trying to do for the last 19 years and some months, is not be selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, inconsiderate, and dishonest. Now, what we're going to talk on are these two steps, 8 and 9. Now, steps 8 and 9. This is where I go out and I make amends. Now, in step 8, it says, we made a list of all people we have harmed, all persons we have harmed, and became willing to make amends to them all. And in step 9, it says we go out and we make direct amends to people. So I go out and I start making the amends. Now, if you've done steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you are willing to make these amends, because now you're starting to see the truth about the situation, that it wasn't everybody else, it was my selfishness, self-centeredness, self-seeking, inconsideration, and dishonesty that really was the root of the trouble. Now, step 8. Step 8, when I make this list, step 8 is actually a gimme step. See, if you did 4 and 5 thoroughly and honestly, you have something called a harms list. And in this harms list, some people came off your resentment list, your fears list, your sex conduct list, and went on your harms list. So what I do is I take this harms list coming out of the 5th step and I transfer it to a step 8 amends list. So step 8 is actually already done for you. Now, a lot of people, including me, when I first came into this thing, I thought making amends was for the other person. The amends process is not for the other person. It's for me. Now, what do the steps produce? The steps produce a personality change. So, when I start making amends to other people, I'm practicing honesty. I'm practicing consideration. I'm thinking of others now. So every time I make one of these amends, my personality changes. I'm making the amends really for my personality to change, not for the other person. And I think a lot of people miss that point. Now, how many of y'all try to make amends in treatment? Or you try to make amends over a phone? That's not the way you do it. Now, this part of the process, the amends process, 8 and 9, I believe, and I said I believe, that a sponsor and sponsorship is very, very important in this part of the process. And I think a sponsor, more than any other part of the program, and again, this is what Kevin James believes, it doesn't mean it's the gospel. I believe a good sponsor can pay off dividends when it comes to making the amends. Now, let's talk about a sponsor and what a sponsor actually is and what a sponsor actually is not. Now, a sponsor should be someone who's taken the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, like the book has said. They've had a personality change as a result of the steps, and now they're doing some 10, 11, and 12 days. That's a sponsor. Now, if you have somebody who says, hey, call me every morning, they never get into the book with you, they never show you and give you suggestions on some of the amends that you're going to make, because they're following up some of the things they did, which is make amends. If you just have somebody that says, call me every morning, and you sit down every now and then and you drink some coffee with them and smoke a couple of cigarettes with them, you don't have a sponsor. What you got is somebody to talk to on the damn phone, smoke some cigarettes with, and drink some coffee with. Now, sponsorship. I don't give advice. I don't think I'm qualified to give people advice. What I give people, the ones I sponsor, are suggestions, okay? And when I give a sponsee a suggestion, I can show them where it came out of the first 103 pages of the book, and I can go to it and show it to them. Now, I think one of the things sponsors get tripped up with, I can't give you marital advice because I'm not a marriage counselor. I can't give you financial advice because I'm not a banker. What I can do is go in the big book and show you the suggestions it gives me on dealing with some marital stuff, dealing with some financial stuff. Because look, in the big book, it covers just about everything in the amends process. It covers marital problems, child support, alimony, legal stuff. It covers everything. Now, I want you to remember, in the beginning, you agreed you were willing to go to any length for victory over alcoholism and drug addiction. Any length. And that means making amends. Now, an amends list. On an amends list, again, it's pretty much already made for you. Now, some things I've picked up over the years, some suggestions I've gotten. Step 9, it's both a time and a place, and it tells me when to and when not to make amends. And step 9 says, make direct amends to such people wherever possible. It doesn't say whenever possible, it says wherever possible. So it tells me when to, wherever possible, and then it says when not to, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, for you people making amends, you're not a them or an other. And we're going to explain that in this session. Now, making direct amends to such people wherever possible. If you change that one word, wherever, to whenever, if you left whenever up to an alcoholic, it would never get done. And a lot of people, I've been to meetings a lot of places, and I hear people read step 9 at the beginning of the meeting, and a lot of people read, made direct amends to such people whenever possible. It does not say whenever, it's wherever, and if you change that one word, you change the whole aspect of the step. Now, wherever is both a time and a place. And wherever is when God puts that person in front of my face. When God puts that person in front of my face, he's telling me, my boy, you fixing to get exactly what you need. Now, in the amends process, I've had a lot of good help from a lot of good people suggesting to me what to do. Now, God works through people. And God puts a lot of people in my life, in recovery too, that can show me what to do. Now, we're going to take an amends list, okay? Now, later, maybe, and we got them 1 or 2 SOBs. we say we ain't never gonna make amends to them. Now, on a step 8 amends list, now, maybe, later, never. When I do a 5th step with somebody, what I try to do is take their harms list that we've tweaked and developed over the 5th step and take that harms list and make a step 8 amends list. Now, some people who are pretty much going to be put in front of you sort of real quick, the nouns, okay, are probably going to be mommy dearest, dad, kids, spouse. See, they'll probably be put in front of you pretty quick. Some laters, old grandma, old granny, employer, maybe some friends. Now, some maybes. Everybody's got a couple of maybes. Maybe old Auntie M, you're just not sure about old Auntie, okay? And many of you, you got some ex-employers. You're just not sure yet. You got some ex-friends you're not sure of. Now, everybody's got 1 or 2 nevers, okay? One of my nevers was my ex-wife. I said, I'll never make amends to that bitch. And the guy, I'm just going to put guy up here, that she ran off with, okay? Now, this was an amends list. Now, later, maybe never. Now, I've still got a person who's on this never list that I've never been able to make amends to because he's never been put in front of my face. See, the wherever part has never come into play yet. But I'm free from this because I'm willing to do it. See, the freedom doesn't come from the actual amends making. It comes from the willingness to make the amends. That's where the freedom comes from. That's where the guilt leaves. That's where the remorse leaves, when I truly become willing to make the amends. And I have enough faith and trust in God when that time comes and that person's put in front of me, I'm going to make the amends. Now, the way that this works, the amends process, okay? Some of these people are going to be put in front of me sort of quick. And I make these amends, okay? And so I take one of these laters and I move over here. I take one of these maybes and I move over here. And now, since I'm getting some pretty good results, I take one of these nevers and I move to the maybe. And I just keep moving them over until some of the amends are made. Again, I may not be able to make the amends because the person's never been put in front of me. Now, I think one of the biggest mistakes that newcomers make, they try to take this list, make it on their own, and they try to get on their whatever mode of transportation they have coming out of treatment, a skateboard, a car, a bike, or their feet, and go start running people down trying to make amends. And if you do that, you're probably going to get loaded. Because you're not waiting on God to put the people in front of you. You're still trying to run the show. And we know what happens when you try to run the show. So I think one of the biggest, best suggestions I got was, I don't go run people down. I wait wherever possible for God to put that person in front of me. Now, I'm going to give you, when we really start talking about some amends, I'm going to give you some personal amends that I've made. I'm going to give you some examples I've heard through the years. But if you get nothing else out of today, the amends process, I want you to really keep this in mind. That I make amends when those people are put in front of my face. Look, I don't make amends, and it was suggested to me to never make amends over a phone. See, look, I didn't call people on the phone and tell them, say, hey, look, I'm fixing to come steal your damn weed eater. So I don't call people over a phone and make amends. I make amends face to face. And even though a lot of people think it's okay to write a letter, in one or two or three instances, it is. But I think this letter writing business is overblown. See, you didn't write a letter and tell them, hey, I'm fixing to come steal your shit. So don't write a letter and make amends. Now, one of the things I hear a lot is when somebody is deceased, to write a letter to them, go to their grave, read the letter, and then burn it. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that is actually a cop-out. Because see, look, my mother, she got to see me sober for about 15, 16 years. And I had a chance to make amends to my mother. But let's just say for shits and giggles that my mother would have passed away before I got sober. Could I make direct amends to her? I don't think so, but I could make some indirect amends. And this is how I can make some indirect amends. My mother was real big in the Catholic Church. I could have went and volunteered for a couple of weekends at something to do with that church to help out and say, Mama, that was for you. See, instead of writing a letter, it really, I don't believe, does a lot of good. So I can make some amends indirectly by volunteer at a church, a soup kitchen, a food bank for a couple of weekends and say, that was for you. That's my amends to you. Now, the big book from page 77 to page 83, it covers just about everything that you could possibly think of. It talks about if I owe money to a creditor. It talks about if I owe child support, alimony, committed a criminal offense. It tells me what to do. So when I sponsor people and it comes to an amends, I try to show them in the book what it says to do. Okay? I don't try to give them Kevin's advice, because Kevin's advice got me loaded and it will probably get them loaded. And I think a lot of sponsors, they get caught up in giving advice. Look, this is what I tell people that I sponsor when they first come to me and we start getting in the book. I say, look, don't ask me for marriage advice, because hell, I've been divorced. You probably don't want to take it from me. Don't ask me about borrowing money, because I'm not a banker, and the answer would be no. Now, if you want me to sponsor you and walk you through some amends, I can show you what it says in the book. You know, some of the craziest stuff I've heard from sponsors is when it comes to relationships. And I hear shit like this: under every skirt is a slip. What kind of suggestion is that? Get a plan. If you can keep a plant alive for a year, you're ready for a relationship. What the shit is that? Look, I couldn't keep a plant alive for a week. I don't have a green thumb, so I would be celibate for the rest of my life. I think sponsors, or so-called sponsors, try to give a lot of advice instead of going in the book and showing a sponsor, what does the book say? Sometimes I want to throw up when I hear somebody in a meeting say, well, my sponsor says, well, my sponsor says, well, what's the big book say? See, when somebody says, well, you know, the big book says, then I sort of listen. Now, what we're going to do, okay, we're going to get into the book here in a little bit. And we're going to go over some things that the book says about when to, when not to. I'm going to give you some personal examples of what the book says, what I've been taught, what I've been suggested through the years. And some amends that I have made when people were put in front of my face. I thought some people were going to just pat me on the back and say, attaboy. And they let me have it. And I thought some people who were going to let me have it showed me a lot of patience, love, tolerance, and forgiveness. And every time I've waited for the person to be put in front of me, because God put them in front of me, I got just what I needed. Now, what we're going to do before we get into that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take us about a 15-minute break. We're going to let you go to the potty and smoke you a couple of cigarettes. So it's about 20 minutes till. So 15 minutes, at 5 minutes till, we're going to get back in and we're going to get into the book and we're going to get into some real good stuff. Okay? 15 minutes. All right, we want to welcome everybody back from a little break. We're going to finish this session up. I want you to open your big book up, and I want you to turn to page 83. I tell you what, let's go to the last paragraph on 82 is where we'll start. On page 82, the last paragraph, it says the alcoholic is like a tornado, roaring their way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. See, it doesn't say oxy and roxycontin habits have kept the home in turmoil. It says selfish and inconsiderate habits. Now, let's say a person gets sober, but they don't make amends. And they say, well, look, a lot of people go, well, I'm sober. What's the use of these amends? Somebody who says that, somebody who's thinking that, still has selfish and inconsiderate habits, and they won't stay sober very long. Again, I'm making the amends for my personality to change. So if I make the amends, I'm thinking of others and not being selfish. I'm practicing consideration and not being inconsiderate. All right, back in the book. It says, we feel a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. He's like the farmer who came out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing. See, a lot of people who don't make amends are like this farmer. They come up and everything's ruined. And they go, well, I'm not drinking anymore. I don't see anything the matter here. Still selfish and self-centered to the core. It says, yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. Look, one of the suggestions I was given is never ever tell somebody I'm sorry. Because when I tell you I'm sorry, what I'm doing is setting you up to screw you over again. The way an amends is made is like this. I was wrong for what I did. I want to know what I can do to make it right. I zip my mouth and I let you tell me what I can do to make it right. Now, don't go ask if you're not willing. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it. See, if you have done a good fourth and fifth step, you seeing shit completely different because now you're seeing the truth. Being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are our own actions are partly responsible. Now, I want you to ask yourself this question. How many of you pull the worst out in people or the best? See, I don't know about you, but before I came into the program, I'll give you an example of my mother. My mother was one of the most spiritual women I'd ever been around. And what I could do to her is make her one of the most selfish, inconsiderate people because I would pull the worst out in her. So ask yourself, do you pull the best out in people or do you pull the worst out in people? So I clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation, our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. You have to live it. See, look, you can't talk this shit. You can't read this shit. You can't think about this shit. You got to do like the Nike bumper sticker says, just do it. The spiritual life, it's not a theory. You got to live it by your actions, not your mouth. Unless one's family expresses the desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them. We should not talk insistently to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior, that's your actions, will convince them more than your words, that's your mouth. You must remember, 10 or 20 years of shooting heroin will make a skeptic out of anyone. Now, when I first got sober, and I'm really trying to do right and live a spiritual kind of life, this is what my first sponsor suggested. He says, you know, Kevin, he says, nobody wants to hear what kind of a spiritual life you live. See? And he turned to that page in the book where it says that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. And people are going to change by my actions, my behavior, not my mouth. He said, you know, 3 months ago, you were a crackhead, and now you want to talk to people about spiritual matters. They don't want to hear that shit. What they want is to see by your actions what you're going to do. Back in the book. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves we would right them if we could. See, again, the freedom comes from the willingness to make the amends, not the actual making the amends. See, again, I gave you an example of that. This guy right here, he's still on my list. He's never been put in front of my face. But I've been free of that for a long time because I've been willing to make the amends if he's put in front of my face. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. See, this is where people get the lettership. And there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases. Now, I'm going to give you a valid reason for postponement and an example of why you may want to write a letter. Now, a valid reason for postponement, making direct amends face to face. Let's say I have some legal issues. I committed battery on this person. And part of my probation is I can have no contact with them. So is it a good idea not to make face-to-face amends? Probably so. But remember, the freedom comes from the willingness to make the amends, not the actual amends. Now, in this case, sitting down, writing a letter to this person, that would be maybe a reason to write a letter. Who can guide me right here? Who can give me some very valuable suggestions? Watch this shit. A sponsor. And what's a sponsor? Someone who's taken the steps and as a result has had a personality change, and they show me what the book says, not what some other person has said. Back in the book. But we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. Servile means bowing down, and scraping means arguing or fighting. It says, as God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. Now, I'm going to give you some personal experiences with some amends. Now, I was probably about a year, 2 years, about a year and a half sober. And before I got real bad, I was married. And a cousin of mine sold me a house. And back then, to buy a house, not only did you have to have a down payment, you had to be able to show where you could pay the payment. Now, I didn't have a down payment, but me and the wife, we both had jobs and we could make the payment. So what he did was, not only did he sell me the house at a good price, he loaned me the down payment in order to buy the house. So what I had to do was pay the house note and then pay him a little note on the side for the down payment. Now, all went well for about 5 or 6 years. Things start unraveling. The wife leaves. I quit paying the note. I quit paying him. Now, fast forward. I'm about 1.5 years, going on 2 years sober. And he had had a chance to hear what I had been doing. And I had been doing a lot of things where my life had changed. I was working in the field by that time. So one visit home, he was put in front of my face. See, God said, hey, my boy, you're fixing to get exactly what you need right now. So he's put in front of my face. And I said, hey, man, I know I was wrong for what I did to you. I want to know what I can do to make it right. And I shut my mouth. I didn't say another word. And he says, well, you know, Kevin, I've been hearing what you've been doing, and I got to tell you, I'm impressed. He said, I tell you what, you keep doing what you're doing, and we're not going to worry about the money. Now, at that time in my recovery, I needed someone to show me what forgiveness and tolerance really meant. I got exactly what I needed. Now, let's just say I would have did this on my own. I would have went up to him 6 months sober and said, hey, man, I know I owe you some money. I'm going to pay you $100 a month and I'll pay you off. I just cost myself a lot of money. See, if I'd have went up to him 2 years and he would have heard what I had been doing, and I would have told him, hey, I'm going to pay you back. I'm going to pay you $200 a month. And the whole time he's wanting to forgive me, I cost myself a lot of money. So the way I make amends is when that person's put in front of me, I say, I was wrong for what I did. What can I do to make it right? And I shut my mouth. And they're going to tell me what I can do to make it right. Now, we're going to fast forward about 5 years sober. This person's put in front of my face, and I think they're going to give me one of them attaboys, and they let me have it. They told me exactly what they thought of me, that I was a selfish crackhead, and they didn't want nothing to do with me. Now, at that time in my recovery, this thing was getting sort of big, and I needed somebody to put me back in my place. And I got exactly what I needed. Every time I've waited for God to put that person in front of me, I've got exactly what I needed. Sometimes I needed some patience, love, and forgiveness. And at other times I needed somebody to remind me who and what I really was. Now, the amends, okay? God puts people in front of me to help me. Now, one of my biggest things when I came in to treatment, when I came into treatment, I had not filed income tax probably in about 12 years. And I owed the IRS a lot of money. And this is an amends I didn't think I would never get squared away. Now, I'm sitting with my sponsor one day, and this amends is weighing heavily on me because I can't get a real job, because if I start paying taxes, they're going to start garnishing my wages. So he says, well, look, why don't you, I'm going to suggest you do this. Why don't you go sit down with them and see what they say? They can't get nothing because you ain't got nothing. He says, and look, they're not going to put you in jail. That's what they do to people who really try to screw them over and try to avoid them. So I took that suggestion. I went down to the IRS, sat down with them, and I told them, Look, I hadn't filed income tax in almost 12 years. I think I owe you about 25 grand. The man looked at me and he says, well, you know, Mr. James, he says, we have something called an offer in compromise that not a lot of people know about. He says, have you ever seen these lawyers on TV that can tell you they can settle your tax bill for pennies on the dollar? I said, yeah. He says, we do the exact same thing for you for free. Now, I want you to listen to this. This is how God really was helping me. He says, I tell you what we're going to do today. We're going to go back and file every year that you didn't file and see what you owe us. That man went back and filed every year for me, got me all up to date. And after about an hour of sitting talking to him, he says, you owe us about 25 grand. I went, I know. He says, we can do this thing called an offer in compromise, where you tell me what you own. We're going to put a value on it. He says, what do you own? I said, nothing but a car. He says, what do you think the car is worth? I said, about $500. So this was the offer in compromise they made me. Pay us $500 as soon as you can. And for the next 5 years, if you file your income tax on time, and if you owe us, if you get a refund, we get it. And if you owe us something, we're going to put that on the tax bill. And if you do that for 5 years, we're going to write off what you owe us. I went, what? So for 5 years, what I did was I filed my income tax on time. And most of the time I got a little refund and they got it. And after 5 years of doing that, they took that tax bill and wrote it off. Now, when somebody is doing the next thing right and they're really trying, God puts a lot of people in front of them in their life to help them. Now, how many of us, we've got some amends we don't think we can ever get right? And if you're trying to do it, you'll never get it right. But when we turn it over, we put it in God's hands, He puts people in front of us to help us. All right, back in the book. Now, the bottom of page 83. We're going to read the step 9 promises. Some people call them promises. Other people, like myself, I like to refer to them as results. Now, we're going to read the step 9 promises or results 2 different ways. The first way we're going to read them is the wrong way. The second way we're going to read them is the correct way. Now, I want you to remember back when you first started using and you were having fun and it wasn't causing you a lot of problems. They call it the honeymoon period. Now, that's what I want you to remember back to when you were first started using and it was fun and it wasn't causing you a lot of major consequences. That's what I want you to remember. Now, again, the first way we're going to read them is going to be the wrong way. The second way is going to be the right way. Now, remember back when you were first started getting loaded, okay? We're going to go down to the third sentence from the bottom on page 83. When I got loaded, I knew a new freedom and a new happiness. How many of y'all the first couple of 1 or 2 or 3 times you got loaded, you went, woohoo, shit, I done found something here. You knew a new freedom and a new happiness. When I got loaded, I did not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. When I got loaded, I comprehended the word serenity and I knew peace. No matter how far down the scale I go, I will see how my experience can benefit others. When I got loaded, that feeling of uselessness and self-pity disappeared. When I got loaded, I lost interest in selfish things and gained interest in my fellows. Buy everybody one up in this bar room on me. I got it. When I got loaded, self-seeking slipped away. Check this one out. When I got loaded, my whole attitude and outlook upon life changed. When I got loaded, fear of people and economic insecurity left me. When I got loaded, I intuitively knew how to handle situations which used to baffle me. You ever been around a bunch of drunks when they drunk? They can solve everything from teen pregnancy to the suicide rate in America. Just ask them. And the last one, I suddenly realized that drugs and alcohol were doing for me what I could not do for myself. Now, everything that I can get through the steps, I looked for in drugs and alcohol. Isn't that crazy? I can get the same thing out of the steps that I used to get out of drugs and alcohol. Now, I want you to go back to page 83, the last paragraph. We're going to read these the correct way. Now, when I start making the amends, this is when I'm going to start getting these results. And I'm going to start getting these results, and it's going to motivate me to do more amends and more amends and more amends. But when I start making the first couple, I'm going to start to get these results. Last paragraph on 83. If I'm painstaking about this phase of my development, the amends phase, I'm going to be amazed before I'm halfway through. Now, let's say you got 50 people on an amends list. Half of that's 25. It says before you're halfway through. So when you start making the first 1, 2, 3 amends, see, before you're halfway through, you're going to start to get these results. I'm going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. One that drugs and alcohol never have given me. I'm going to have something new that I've never experienced before. I don't know about you, but I wanted that. I will not regret the past, nor was to shut the door on it. Look, my past that I used to always regret, my past is one of the best assets I have today. Because my past has helped not only me, but it's helped me help a lot of other people. So why would I regret my past? I will comprehend the word serenity, and I will know peace. Now, I could talk to you for the next hour about serenity and peace, but I'm not going to do that. See, you take the steps. You're going to find some new serenity and some peace. It says no matter how far down the scale I've gone, I'm going to see how my experience can benefit others. Now, some of us come in here and we went way down the scale. We lost everything. And a person who's lost everything, the way this works, they're going to go into the fellowship. Somebody else is going to come into the fellowship who went all the way down like they did. Then you're going to have some people who didn't lose everything. They still have a home, a job, a car. Somebody else is going to come into the fellowship that went down just like you did. And they're going to be able to relate to you or they couldn't relate to me. So no matter how far down the scale you went, your experience is going to help somebody. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. See, they're not saying it might, they're saying it will. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. You know, one of the last things my dad told me before I went to treatment, he says, you know, son, he says, you're a taker. You're not a giver. And under my breath, I went, who the fuck's he think he's talking to? And you notice I said under my breath, huh? But he was dead on the money right. See, I took and I took and I took and I took and I never gave. I was a taker. Fear of people and economic insecurity will lead me. Look, When they talk about this promise, this result, fear of people and economic insecurity are going to leave me, they're not talking about physically. Look, I guarantee if a 6'8", 300-pound guy starts chasing me, he ain't going to catch me. They're not talking about that. See, I don't fear what you say about me or what you think about me anymore. How many of us, we would fit ourselves like a pretzel to get people to like us? It says fear of people are going to leave me. What that means is I don't worry what you say or think about me. What I worry about is what God thinks about me. It says economic insecurity is going to leave me. What they mean by that is this: I'm going to be grateful and thankful for what I have. See, some people, they got $500, they want 1,000. They get 1,000, they want 10. They get 10, they want 20. They will never be economically secure because they always want more. When a person is content and grateful for what they have, they are economically secure. And then God gives them more and more and more. I can remember being in sober living, making $6 an hour, and I was economically secure because I was content and grateful for that sober living. I was content and grateful for making $6 an hour. And God would steadily give me more and more and more. That's what economically secure means. You're happy and content with what you have. I will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. And the reason I don't handle situations that used to baffle me is because I let God handle them. And then the last one, if you ever get this one, you got something. I'm going to suddenly realize that God is doing for me what I could not do for myself. Now, those results right there, I want you just to think about this. If you were getting those results, do you think you would find it necessary to put something in you to change the way you felt? Now, it says, are these extravagant promises? And they got a question mark. Now, if you're not getting them because you're not doing the work, do they sound like extravagant promises? They do. But if you're actually doing the work and getting these results, these promises, they don't sound like extravagant promises. It says they're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly. That's the spiritual experience. And sometimes slowly. That's the spiritual awakening. It says they will always materialize if you work for them. Now, extravagant promises. If you're not getting them, do they sound like extravagant promises? They do. Look, I can remember one of the first times I was ever around Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. A PO was making me go to some meetings and get that paper signed. Y'all know how we do. I can remember pulling up to the meeting, and I would wait until about a minute before that meeting started. And I'd be sitting in the parking lot, and I'm watching people pull up. And they pulling up in nice cars and shit. And they getting out, and they dress nice. You know what I thought? I said, they slinging dope. They got to be driving something like that, dressing like that. I'd go in the meeting, and people who were actually doing those step work and had a personality change, they're happy, they're smiling, they're joyous, they're free. You know what I thought? Them some bitches get loaded. There ain't no way you can be that goddamn happy sober. So I thought all this was a bunch of extravagant bullshit. Now, you fast forward a couple of years, I'm all up in the fellowship. I'm doing step work. And I start to get these promises. And I look back and I sort of laughed at some things. Those people pulling up in nice vehicles, they weren't slinging dope. They were doing the right thing. And they were getting the promises, the results the big book says. And the reason they were happy, joyous, and free, it wasn't because they were getting loaded. They were actually happy. Sober. How many of us we say that AA shit don't work? How would you know? You've never done it. How many of y'all, the first time you ever had dope in your hand, the very first time, you've never used it, it's in your hand, how many of y'all went, well, this shit ain't gonna work, and threw it away? See, you didn't do that. You tried it. And once you tried it, then you knew it worked. Now, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, how many of y'all condemn it before you've even tried it? Now, I'll make a deal with people. This is what I tell them. Try this shit. Exactly what the first 103 pages of the big book say for 1 year. 1 year. Do exactly what it says. And if you don't like the results you're getting, bring me your big book back and I will refund all your misery and all your pain. Now, in almost 19 years, I've never had anybody bring me their big book back. Because see, look, if you're actually doing what the first 103 pages of the big book say, there's no way you would want to bring me the book back. And if you're not doing what the big book says, you couldn't find the goddamn big book you got to bring it back to me anyway. So quit saying it doesn't work and just do it. Now, this session, we've got you up to steps 8 and 9, the amends process. When we start the next session, we're going to start getting in to how to really start living again in step 10. And that's what we're going to start talking on in the next session. So we want to thank y'all. Y'all have a good afternoon, and we'll see y'all next session.